Anger and Hurt. Chapter 14. This chapter was written from the point of view of Admiral Arlo Murphy. Arlo, wake up. You are being summoned by the Armada Council. Jane, my ship, shouted beside me. I dressed up quickly and Jane teleported me to the Armada Council hallway. I saw General Ellie Nolan sitting in one of the benches. Hello, Ellie. I greeted and sat beside her. I overslept. I told you not to drink so much last night. Ellie said. I know, you drank more than I did. I guess your Irish uncles protected you. I said. Now that you're sober, I will tell you that every time I went to the ladies' room, I passed by the bar and got double shots of scotch. I think I downed a whole bottle. This way I will look a bit more tipsy and not make you doubt that I am actually drinking or not. That's very kind of you. I said, laughing. The Armada Council was headed by Matt, with President Billy and Secretary Roger, Amy, and John. It actually includes Beetle, the head of the Looney Council, and Trio, the head of the Leo Colony. Beetle, Trio, Amy, and John were not present at the moment. We had our meeting at Billy's space station office. Billy started by explaining a report by Secretary of State Stella Hopkins on a meeting between the TAMS and Looney Federation Council officers where they basically told Beetle that any outside attack to their 10 planets and any of their colonies may not get assistance from the Federation, which the TAMS dominate militarily. Matt explained the need for secrecy and that we want to project Looney power among the Looney Federation members without human help. Roger recommends a standard response of investigation, tagging and logistics deployment. My base will be the military base on Olympus while Ellie will use the military outpost. Roger also clarified our timetable. The investigation will not have an ending until the threat is fully resolved, meaning the TAMS and SAMs are defeated. The tagging will take 6 months. The deployment of weapon systems and logistics will take 3 months, except for some areas that may need more but production is lacking. Matt talked about creating the 4th and 5th Armadas to protect Earth's and New Earth's backside far from the operational areas of the Federation Armada and the Earth quadrants in 3 months. He mentioned this because they will probably take my second in command and Ellie's first officer to head these 2 armadas. The Council will take half of our personnel and transfer them to the 2 new armadas. That the Council is giving us free rein to recruit from the existing Federation and Quadrant Space Fleet personnel. Billy went on to say that after 2 months, Ellie would be assigned to go all the way to the SAMs and do the same prep activities including weapons deployment. We're not doing the 2-word mission statements? I asked. Don't worry, we will issue them when Ellie moves to the SAMs. Right now both of you are working together. Billy said with a smile. Together you get 4 words: investigate, tag, and deploy logistics. How's that? Roger asked. That will work. But that's 5 words. Ellie said. We also need to train taggers and infiltrators. You will get more Loonies and Leos, maybe 4 times, in preparation for Ellie's deployment at the SAMS Galaxy. Roger said. Don't worry, these are not really new newbies but broken into newbies. Matt said. That's comforting to know. I said. How do you suggest we divide the work? Ellie asked. My thinking is that Ellie be assigned to the TAMS area while you Arlo work on the other members of the Looney Federation. I want to know what their relationships are. Billy said. This way when you, Ellie, go to the SAMs, you would have a solid understanding of the TAMS and relate this to the SAMs. You will continue to investigate the TAMS and relate this to the other aliens in the Federation. Roger added. Okay. Ellie said. And Ellie, have fun doing it. Roger said. Don't I get to have fun? I asked. Are you not already? Billy asked. Back in my bridge. Jane, I want to meet the commanders in the mission room. I walked over to the mission room. I sat in one of the chairs around the conference table and waited. First to appear was my science officer Colonel Debbie Hayes, then my Vice Admiral Logan Brunner, then my operations head Colonel Bruno Gonzalez, Colonel Nick Baxter, the U.S. Armada Commander, Commander Trinon, a Looney, and Commander Bernie, a Leo. Please sit. I gestured as I came. By now you know of our 4-letter mission, I assume. They all nodded. Arlo, it's pretty much SOP and I think we should do this to gain more experience as we go along. Logan said. I agree. This is an on-the-job training mission. Debbie said. Jane, show us our area of operations. I said. A star map appeared for all the 4 alien species other than the Tams and Loonies appeared floating on top of the table. Jane lights the alien species by color and we could see where they were. The whole area spans 400 mly at its longest. We can deploy our ships and TP ships like a grid to cover the whole area. We divided into 16 grids, 4 grids per species and allocated 10 ships per grid. Debbie, you take the Tramos grids, Logan you take the Send-ins, Bruno you take the Grayolas and Nick will take the Sigmas. Trinon, you are in charge of the taggers who are all Loonies across the 4 grids. While you Bernie will handle all the hackers and infiltrators in the 4 grids. I want you folks to come out with our tagging objectives and weapon systems deployment in your grids. We'll meet in 3 days. After 3 days. As the officers talk, Jane presented what the 4 grids show as tagging objectives and timetable. The numbers look massive considering we were dealing with 4 species. She also showed where the remote plasma cannons will be deployed, where the mines will move around, where the traffic will be cut in case of an embargo and where the potential military targets were for our drones. We concluded that the 4 species are not militarily better than the Loonies. What we found out from our infiltration was that the 4 species were already in collusion with the Tams and the Tams are just beefing up their main attack forces and making sure their occupation forces will be able to control the 10 planets. One disturbing piece of information is how the 4 species were dividing the technology spoils of the Loonies. We also found out that they were not aware of the presence of human technologies and the products of the factories we set up. Very early on we insisted on total secrecy on all our projects and since the Loonies knew the intentions of the Federation against their species, they were extremely motivated and kept everything secret. They also were not aware of Olympus because all above ground structures were invisible and the planet remained pristine. It was also SOP for people to appear above ground as Loonies rather than humans. They also saw that the Laos were not even space-worthy and saw them as dependent on the Loonies for space travel. With the introduction of agriculture by Chris, they see the Laos as medieval. I think their overconfidence, which is consistent with overconfidence of the Tams, is their greatest weakness. The Laos found out that their data systems were much older than what the Loonies have, which is consistent with their level of technologies. They simply created bots that took over all their systems on command. For added nastiness, they left viruses that the bots can control release. They ensure several systems will have virus several times in the future. Since we left a lot of invisible TP ships in the area which also doubled as communication relays and repeaters, we get all their communications among themselves and with other alien species. After the meeting, I authorized tagging to begin. We also deployed invisible unmanned transport ships. These will deploy the remote cannons and various mines on command. After 2 months we have the capability to follow all the leaders 4 layers down, monitor all their conversations, and have visuals on demand thanks to millions of drone probes that we deployed in the 4 species world. All the military and transport ships were tagged and bombed either with an EMP or regular or small thermonuclear bomb. In some ships we place invisible remote plasma cannons that can fire into the ship or to other enemy ships while attached to the ships. All the military factories had invisible bombs that will detonate on command. Then we moved to the Tams area as Ellie left for the SAMs. Ellie did the standard preps pretty much like what we did. The tagging was 4 levels down, all the ships and transport ships were tagged and bombed, remote plasma cannons placed on the ships, all the factories bombed, all the communications among the people were monitored and recorded. Based on Ellie's assessment, the Tams was not even militarily strong by human standards. They had numerous ships, but they have very weak armor, their ship weapons were standard lasers, no plasma, no EMP bombs or cannons. Their soldiers, while numerous were as overconfident as their leaders but compared to human military training, these people are not even at 30% level. I was tasked to write the final assessment of the Federation threat for the Looney and Armada Council. And I simply repeated what Ellie reported and what we concluded with the other 4 species. I later found out that the Loonies felt terribly hurt that the other species in the Federation were conniving against them, even dividing the spoils. The Loonies would be treated as spoils to be enslaved to serve the other Federation species. I think this permeated among the populace and they were angry. The loonies never get angry. I have never heard them getting angry in all their history. The hurt caused the anger. They have never been hurt this way, not by anybody in all their history. They wanted to end the war before it started, but we told them we had to finish with the SAMs first. They felt helpless. We were controlling the military operations, and we just can't start a war. So, the council decided to increase the production of ships. Not that this is new, since John had forced them to do this early on. But now they are doing it with a vengeance. They devoted all their excess people and production capacities to producing ships. And they were doing it clandestinely. They instituted news blackout and did security checks on non-loony species, especially Federation member species. Except humans, of course. They also forced the Armada to accept more loonies among its ranks. They sent 100 transport ships to Allen with more than 1 million loonies so Allen can train them. They forced the Armada Council to take in the same amount for my group and Ellie's group. I assigned them to tagging missions, even if unnecessary, to train them and give them the experience of doing something. The Leos started a program to train the loonies how to infiltrate and hack data systems. Since they found out that the loony data systems were more advanced by decades compared to the other aliens, they adapted and learned very quickly. General Alan Cook appeared as a holo in front of me. "Hi, Arlo," he greeted. "Hey, Alan. How are you?" "Pretty well, thank you. As you know, the Butts have joined my Armada, and they are actually monitoring you and Ellie. And they want to help." "How?" "Actually, I don't think they can help with anything. But it's good PR, consider them as trainees for future operations. Ask the Armada Council and I will be okay with it." I said. "Yes, I just wanted to know what you feel about it. I will also ask Ellie before I go to the Armada Council. By the way, Alan, how many people are we talking about?" I asked. "About 1 million for you and 1 million for Ellie." I was floored but smiled at Alan. I realized that once the Butts get into the picture, the Armada numbers would be in the millions. I am just curious how funding a huge army will be done. Earth has never had armies in the millions, and this changes a lot of things, from training, to logistics, to communications, command and control, strategies and planning. And these problems present themselves in an Armada with multiple species. I also realized that once we have the other species and the TAMs settled, we would have to go around. One thing we learned from the 4 species is that they trade with other species much further out. I would have to access these whether they are benign or pose a threat. I decided to send 4 scout teams of 5 ships. My people also found out about several species being enslaved by the SAMs, and I told them to forward the intel to Ellie. The galaxies are really a bad place, like the Wild West, and it's good that we developed a good military before venturing out. I decided to make a sweep of our neighbors. I organized my group to fly around 10 MLY apart from each other and move outwards from our immediate neighbors. No contact will be made, but the area would be mapped out for its inhabitants. We found 11 species within 200 MLY of space around the loonies. 5 of these species were known to the Federation and they are trading with them. These species were within 40 MLY of the loony world. These were not at all advanced, and only 3 of the 5 has FTL capabilities, although the 2 will be FTL capable in a few years. These are all peaceful and wanted to join the Federation, but they were deemed to be too young to join. As we moved around, we made sure that we leave drone probes in various gas planets to enable us to have a scan of the area. We left drone probes along the way so we can always have communication with all the drones we deployed. These are our early warning devices. We normally leave a dozen drone probes per planet, and these provide us with real-time view of the planet and what is happening around it. Out of the 11 species we encountered, 6 were much further out. None of them know of each other since they were isolated and far from each other, as they are in the outermost part of the 200 MLY sphere. They all do not have FTL capabilities, so they do not pose the slightest threat to us. Until we hit the last of the 6 and we realized there were ships hovering in their upper orbit. We left our usual dozen drones and did not engage them. Later on we realized that these were first contact ships and were friendly to the locals. We tagged these ships and sent tiny probes inside them. When we got back to the loony world, we transferred the task of monitoring our neighbors to the loonies. This was so they won't feel left out and to have a way to actually feel they are doing something, especially now that they are very angry. This task had a welcome outcome since the loonies have always improved on anything they do. They found ways to improve the process of monitoring, they improved the communications equipment, and they organized themselves to be most efficient in monitoring these. But they also have an unintended outcome of fueling their anger and hurt, since now they can see their enemies' activities in communications. After a few months of monitoring and eavesdropping, the loonies launched their new communications probes to add it to the network around our area. These were smaller and more independent, had more complete scanning and spying capabilities. We had to create an entirely new line of probes all around, beginning from the loony world. And they were still angry and hurt, showing the extreme level of their pain. But we were now closer to them than at any time in our history. As is their usual practice, they improved on the intel gathering, monitoring, and analysis. They gathered so much information they practically know everything there is to know from observing from above. At some point they requested us to send infiltrators to hack into the databases of our neighbors to know their history, society and culture, military and commercial capabilities, and so on. This took some time to implement since there were so many of them and we had to plan each operation unique to a planet. This became an ongoing operations and the loonies enjoyed themselves so much. But they were still feel the anger and hurt ever present. I guess pranksters have a different method of getting motivated.